Hello, hello, hello. The native people of this country are less powerful than ever before. Arguably, even in medieval times, the peasantry had a better chance of toppling a lord or king or forcing them to make a change in policy. Today, we don't even understand who our true rulers are, let alone have the nerve to revolt against them. So, whilst modern people understand that power means the ability to effect change, they don't understand what true power looks like, what it's measured by, or how to gain it. Watch this video then as I talk about the two components of power. Coercive power, by which I really mean perceived destructive capacity, and persuasive power, and then touch upon some practical advice about how we might actually gain power. Without further ado, let's get into it. As I said, power has two components, the coercive and the persuasive. As I see it, the coercive is always the stronger form of power, though the persuasive too does hold immense sway. To truly understand coercive power though, one must understand what is meant by the term Machiavellian. Machiavellianism, named after Renaissance-era Florentine diplomat Niccolo Machiavelli, who by the way was not himself a Machiavellian, means the relentless pursuit of power or furtherance of self-interest without regards to morality or anything else. Machiavellians care not for morals, emotional or physical harm, conventional rules of fair play, or anything else that any kind-hearted person would find objectionable. Rather, Machiavellians are totally cold-hearted in their pursuits of power. Whilst Machiavellians can be persuaded that doing or promoting something is in their self-interest, and like anyone else they too can become victims of misinformation, for the most part only coercive power works against Machiavellians. And by the way, when I say coercive power, I primarily mean destructive capacity. Yes, people can be coerced through bribes, but do as I say because I have a knife to your throat is a far more effective strategy. Change is only brought about because people fear the damage that could be done otherwise. And so that is the essence of coercive power. Coercive power is measured by the capacity to cause destruction, or at least the perceived capacity to do so. In the Machiavellian world, the harsh world which I'm afraid we all live in, this form of power is really all that matters. This may be going against conventional wisdom somewhat. After all, Sir Francis Bacon wrote that knowledge is power. But is this not so? Well, knowledge is certainly useful and can lead to one gaining power, but it's actually just a proxy for true power, which is ultimately coercive or persuasive, and primarily coercive. Thus, in reality, knowledge is only useful to the extent that you can coerce someone with its release, such as through blackmail, or convince them of your viewpoint, such as with the sharing of new information. As far as power is concerned, knowledge in and of itself means nothing unless it can persuade or cause damage. And that's basically the entire essence of blackmail. Similar to this, ransom is another form of power. Why? Because if you fail to pay the ransom, you lose something you care about and or is important to you. This is as true of ransomware from hacking a computer as it is to another form of coercive power, economic leverage. Let's say, for example, your country relies on exports to make money. Your country sells 90% of its goods to another far larger country, which in turn only imports 2% of its goods from you. If you didn't do what that country wanted, that country could easily embargo you, destroying your weaker economy. Thus, you are inclined to accept the diktats of the larger country, lest you face economic ruin. It's destructive capacity on the economic front. Similarly to this too, strikes can be incredibly powerful. If your nation relies on coal to keep the lights on, yet every coal miner says they will not work until they get a 10% pay rise, they effectively hold the nation to ransom until they get their way. Why can they do this? Because they hold significant destructive capacity. If no one gets the coal, the lights don't stay on, and there is general chaos. I suspect that this is also why so much of Britain's modern vital industry and commodities are now imported, as the establishment does not wish to be beholden to the power of industry workers. However, important to note is that it's not the strike in and of itself that is powerful. A couple of years ago, for example, there was a strike in Hollywood, not of coal miners, but of scriptwriters. These scriptwriters, convinced that striking in and of itself is what brings one power, were shocked to discover that practically nothing happened when they did strike, and practically no one cared. Why? Because the destructive capacity of not having scriptwriters is really bloody small. And lastly, there is the simplest form of coercion, which is violent force. If you can physically overpower people, you can force them to do what you like. In all of these cases, what power ultimately comes down to is destructive capacity, or at least the threat thereof. This is the ultimate backer of coercive power, whether it's physical, economic, or reputational destruction. Without destructive capacity, your threats have no force behind them and can safely be ignored. Even when you take money from someone, under the condition that you do something for them in return, unless they can force your hand, you could actually just ignore them. You are honour bound to keep your word, of course, but honour is no obstacle to the Machiavellian man. In a Machiavellian world, money is not true power. Money can certainly buy you true power, but is not itself true power. Knowledge is not true power. Popular approval is not true power. Only the perceived ability to destroy things is true power. And that is the alarming revelation. However, this component of power only applies when people lack a sense of honour and honesty, are fully aware of the situation, and are fully wise. In reality, most people are decent and honourable, are never fully aware, and are seldom wholly wise. I dare say a lot of people aren't wise ever at all. Therefore, this fact leaves room for the other component of power, which is persuasion. Though persuasive power can apply to the Machiavellian, either by tricking him or convincing that something is in his interest, which it may very well be, persuasive power is more commonly the domain of decent common people. Persuasive power, which isn't always immoral, most typically takes the form of cultural myths, religious myths, evolved psychological biases, and finally the flow of information, in whatever form that takes, be it news, ideology, history, identity, or anything else. I dare say, at least on the right, it's probably beyond doubt that religion, culture, and evolved psychology are vital for the sustainable running of civilization. These are the things that encourage people to have low time preferences, form stable families, settle down and develop their lands, and band together as nations. Yet, the subversion, manipulation, and invasive encroachment upon such ideas can and does aid those who hold true power. Christianity has been used to justify both the Crusades in the medieval era and egalitarian tolerance today. In both cases, it was used to persuade people to do the bidding of those in power. So too can the control of news, media, ideology, and much else give one true power, as has been written about extensively by people from all areas of the political domain. If you're a part of a mercantile oligarchy, you secure power by being able to convince people that they live in a free and fair democracy. If you want special privileges for your group, you gain power by informing people about the wrongs your group has faced and is today facing. If you can convince people that rising up against the system is deeply immoral, they will not rise up against the system. In these cases, power is evidently not coercive, yet no less real. Yet here lies our biggest problem. Coercive power is primary, persuasive power is secondary. However, the vast majority of the right, especially including the older generations raised in the post-war boomer truth regime, have been convinced that persuasive power is all one needs to gain institutional control. That, if only people could have things properly explained, we would return to common sense politics. That we need to educate the masses, that in the marketplace of ideas, the best ideas will win. Yet, even if north of 80% of people believe that a policy was wrong, or that the establishment must change course, mere persuasion alone will not amount to anything and has no ability to defend against the stronger component of power, coercion. Nor, for that matter, will fame, especially not internet fame. When right-wing people become famous, they either become compromised through coercion, or have their reputation ruined by the media. So, in light of this, how might the right seek true power? What have we been doing wrong, and what ought we do instead? The first thing to say here is that I encourage everyone to stay within the law. The law is there to set the bounds of what the regime finds permissible, and even then, some nominally lawful anti-establishment action can get you arrested or targeted in other ways. With that said, there is still much that can be done. Firstly, there is only so much utility in evangelizing right-wing philosophy as I'm doing now. It's important to do, especially as the true right still has an appallingly small reach, but evangelizing is only useful to the extent that it equips people with the understanding necessary to gain real power. To actually gain real power though, especially for late millennials and zoomers who are financially destitute, I would suggest that the first key step is thus: to enter into vital industries and essentially unionize once inside. On your own, you are nothing, but together a difference can be made. If the entire national grid, transport infrastructure, utilities, or whatever vital industries we have were run by quote-unquote our guys, then we would have the power to make a great number of demands. No more immigration, or the lights go out, the trains stop, and the water stops flowing. This is not your polite electoral politics, it is real power. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, much of Britain's infrastructure and economy is either automated or imported, yet there are still many areas that require domestic workers. For these, concentration is key, and the most important thing is to make yourself irreplaceable. By no means is that easy when our government's importing hundreds of thousands of cheap workers each year, but still it should be tried. I must say though, don't play your cards too early and don't make it obvious what you're trying to do. You're just workers who want to unionize for a bit of extra pay. Just leave it at that. Demands should only be made when there is a critical mass. Secondly, form real networks with like-minded people. Be skeptical of every network that currently exists, and be canny about who is and is not your friend, but try to seek out people of your political persuasion, and try to develop a collective loyalty and identity with them. Again, do nothing with this. Don't go to protest or do anything stupid like that. Just be mates. Appear weak until the day comes when you are strong. But, most importantly, be loyal to each other. One day, you may just become the vanguard of real change. Thirdly, where possible, create parallel economies. Even for things made in Britain, much of the supply chain exists abroad. If you can ensure that all things you need to survive, from farm to plate or from raw materials to shop floor, can be kept within the country by people loyal to their nation, then we have a better chance of surviving any political or economic turmoil. And on that front, learn basic skills. If your life relies on automated processes you do not understand, then you will struggle to survive in the absence of such things. Learn instead to fend for yourselves as a community. Also, become physically stronger and become the best achievable version of yourself. Strength is a proxy for power, and in rough times, strength may ensure your survival. So too may knowledge and will. And lastly, as a precautionary measure to defend against the coercive and persuasive efforts of rival power, do not engage in degeneracy, extremism, or gossip. Your enemies will try to blackmail you or discredit you. The less you give them to go after, the better. But that's it. The point of all of this is to say that trying to win through educating the masses or securing electoral success is not going to happen and always turns out to be a wasted effort, as are protests. If you want power, then you must be able to force people's hands. Do always stay within the law, as the state will take any excuse it can to arrest you and remove you from the equation, which frankly helps nobody. But otherwise, build reliable things for us, march through the industries we rely on, and build solid networks with people you can trust. Only this can make a long-term difference. Anyway, that is all. I fully expect that the content of this video may be alarming to some people, and certainly goes against the cosy but foolish notion of electoral victory. For my part, I wish all of this wasn't the case, and that we could just convince people in a polite manner and win at the ballot box. But I'm afraid I simply do not believe that can ever work. Even with Liz Truss, a milquetoast faux dissident, we saw that the establishment does not allow real change. The revelation of true power is not a pleasant one, but is a necessary one. In any case, if you like this video and want to see more like it, then I encourage you to support me through my Buy Me a Coffee page. Other than that, I thank you for watching. As always, like, subscribe, and God save the King.